minority who procured everything that the slave. And this is where you see the beginning of the state. But it was a shaky proposition because it was built on a foundation where the slave could see on a regular basis what was being produced going to some other sector of the population. So this led to rebellions and all other kinds of contradictions within the society, leading to the development of a new mode of production that was characterized as feudalist mode of production in Europe. And in feudalism, the humans were no longer owned by other humans in Europe, but the land was owned. And the people who worked on the land were peasants and serfs. And they were only able to keep a portion now of what it was they produced, where the vast majority of what they produced went to the landlords, the nobility in that society. And the role of the state now was to protect this relationship between the nobility, between the lords and the land, and the peasants and the serfs, between the nobility and the commoners who were trapped on the land, producing primarily for the landlords and nobility, but able to keep a portion of what they owned for themselves. This is where you get the myths of the Robin Hoods and other kinds of things during feudalism. Feudalism lasted something like 1,000 years in Europe, and the masses of people in Europe lived under extreme poverty. Now something happens now, and where there is this movement from feudalism to a new mode of production that is called capitalism. Feudalism, you had tremendous amount of revolutions that destroyed the feudal order. They happened all over. France, I think, was a leader in this process in Europe, but they occurred all over Europe and in the United States too. The whole struggle of the settlers here who had been sent here by England and other countries to begin to take wealth and back to Europe, now concluded that they didn't want that relationship anymore with the king, and they rebelled against the king. And this was a part of the struggle against the feudal order as well. And so now, coming full blown as a consequence of these revolutions, there emerges in European society this thing known as capitalism. And in capitalism, the primary contradiction exists between the capitalist ruling class, the forces who own and control what is necessary for producing life. We just left feudalism, where the ones who owned and controlled the life's productive capacity was the landlords, the nobility. Now, after this revolution, you have a completely different situation where a handful of people who have captured control of new mode of production that is called capitalism. And under capitalism, the serfs and the peasants are no longer trapped on the land. They can move about relatively freely, going to sell the value of their labor power. And this is the thing that gave the whole capitalist society a character that's been recognized as freedom. This is what contributed to what we call the revolutionary character of capitalism. And so the state looks different now. We've gone through a period where the state, in the possession of the ruling class, which was a slave-owning ruling class in Europe, was all-powerful, and the people had no rights, and everything that they produced went directly to the slave-owning class. And then moving from there, of course, we started, according to the Marxist logic, at a place where there was no state, there was no coercion, there was no exploitation of the labor of anybody, there was no oppression in the society, and that people were respected mostly as elders and things like this because they had inherited that, they had to come about that respect for what they represented in the society itself. But there was no army, there was nothing to make somebody respect somebody. There was no cops on the block or anything to that effect. And then from this, we see movement that results in this, what Marx characterized as primitive communalism or primitive communism, being overthrown, and slavery comes into existence. Now there is coercion, force, special armies, and people with the responsibility of forcing people to produce for this new owning class, the slave owning class, which it's in its own turn is overthrown. And then comes feudalism, where the producers, those who produce the wealth, are not bought and sold, are not owned by individuals, but they're tied to the land, and most of what they produce goes to the landlords and the nobility, and they keep a portion of it for themselves. The primary contradiction now being between the landlords and nobility and the peasants and the serfs in Europe. And this system is overthrown, and then capitalism comes into existence. Now the producers are not tied to the land, and they can go about and sell the value of their labor power to other capitalists throughout the society. And so it's a whole different kind of situation, but there still is exploitation. There still is a group of people, a minority, that is expropriating value, wealth from the majority of the people who actually do the producing. So a non-producing sector of the population continues to take value from a producing sector of the population under capitalism. And this is what creates the profound contradiction in that system. Every instance, what we've seen is the state. The state looks differently, and there was no state under primitive communism, as Marx characterized it. And then there was a state with slavery. The state under slavery was all-encompassing, all oppressive. And then we had that system being overthrown, and feudalism comes into being, into existence. And there are a handful of people who still have the benefit, a non-producing sector that still lives off of the producers, who are now peasants and serfs primarily. That's where the primary contradiction is. Doesn't mean there are not other forces who don't produce. There are craftspersons and things like that that's still there. But the primary contradiction exists between the peasant serfs and the nobility and the landlords. And then this is overthrown, and then capitalism comes into being, where the era of what is characterized as capitalist democracy, that's how in most instances it is referred to, and it's called that because now the producers are not trapped as under slavery and feudalism, but are quote unquote free to go out and sell the value of their labor power, or to sell the value of the labor power, or starve to death. That's what it really is. And so there are contradictions here too. And so my point, of course, is that we start from a place where there's no state, and then the state changes forms, but the state it continues to be there under slavery, under feudalism, under capitalism. We still have the state. So I wanted to say some things about that. And then according to the Marxist theory of development, there's a capitalism is overthrown, and then what follows capitalism is communism. And communism is that time where there is no exploitation, there is no oppression, nobody's oppressed, nobody's exploited, and there is no minority that takes, no non-producing minority that's living off of the producers who do produce all the value in society. That's what's called communism. And that's the dreaded, hated concept that most of the European ruling class has been fighting against, and and many Negroes who do what white people say do have been fighting against as well. So the whole notion of non-exploitation, non-oppression, where the resources in society are owned in common and not expropriated by some minority non-producing sector of the society. So here you have the disappearance of the state. The state is no longer necessary because there's nobody to exploit. There's nobody to oppress because exploitation is no longer existing in the society. And so that's we've seen the sort of a place of no state, and then moving throughout what Marx characterized as social development toward another place of no state, except now society has developed and the ability to produce what we need has developed to such a high extent that that the state is actually redundant. It's absolutely unnecessary, and it functions now as something that blocks the development of human society and even the ability of human beings to produce effectively. That's the Marxist theory. There are aspects of it with which we do agree, but there are fundamental aspects that with which we do not agree. I'm just going to touch on that briefly because I don't want to make this a discussion about the agreements and disagreements with Marx or the questions of the development of human society, but I feel like it's necessary to contextualize the discussion that we're having about the state. Because I recognize that most people who are coming into these discussions come into the discussions without any kind of background in revolutionary social science or revolutionary history or anything like that. So I feel like it's important to sort of contextualize the discussion we're having with the state and I think it's also important to say that this is a discussion that's being held by people who believe that it's absolutely possible to build a different kind of society without exploitation and without oppression. That's what we're looking for. And many people who've condemned what they call Marxism, and we are not Marxists, or they would condemn us for being utopianists because we believe that it's unnecessary for exploitation and oppression to exist, that this is natural and normal, and competition, as they like to call it, is normal, and therefore there must be capitalism because the best of humanity doesn't reveal itself unless humans are competing with other humans. And we say just the opposite is true, that it is possible and necessary for humans to be able to work in common toward common ends, and that it is not necessary for a minority to exploit the labor and value, a minority of non-producers to exploit the labor and value for the majority who do the producing, etc. So the disagreement that we have, a fundamental disagreement we have with Marx is, for one thing, this whole notion that this is a formula that defines the human social development of human society. And it's not a discussion of human society. It's essentially a development of European society that's interacting with the rest of the world, but not defined as such. It is a metaphysical understanding of human society. It's a discussion of European society or human society from a purely European perspective, based on European requirements and understanding for development. For example, while Marx talked about there existing this in common with human society, this era of non-exploitation, non-oppression of women, no exploitation of laborers, etc., we're not sure that existed in Europe as such. We know that the evidence for this that was used by Marx and Engels, who was his partner, was something that came from a man who was an anthropologist, Harry Morgan, I think his name was Morgan, Henry Morgan, Harry Morgan, in the United States, who had done some study, and where he found non-exploitation, non-oppression was with the Iroquois Indians and other non-European societies. And while it may have existed some spots in Europe where there was no exploitation or no oppression, it was never generally true, as far as we can see, that this was the case. And the other thing is that Marx and Engels and none of them did a good job in explaining to us how we move from feudalism to capitalism. It all seems from their perspective to have come about as a consequence of contradictions that inside European society itself that led to revolution, revolutionary transformation, and then one day there's feudalism, the next day the brave workers and peasants and townspeople and peasants and townspeople throughout Europe are rising up in France and other places to overthrow the existing social order. And it was a period of profound philosophical change and challenges, etc. But that's not how we understand it happened, because what happened in Europe that changed Europe, that even established the basis for the philosophical or transformation, the thoughts, the challenges, is that slavery and colonialism that began in Europe to bring tremendous amounts of wealth into Europe, it empowered another force. It gave rise to another class in Europe, and it created a situation for incredible kind of production in Europe. Now, this rapid escalation of production in Europe came about because of what was being stolen in terms of human bodies from Africa, what was being stolen in terms of resources, everything from drugs to potatoes to you name it, that came into Europe, that began to change and transform Europe. It was coming as a consequence of what's stolen outside. The development, the need for the rapid development of industry, the need to get the peasants off of the land came about because the peasants were now needed off the land, working in the shipyards and working in the factories that had to be created to transform all this wealth, all this value, this new social reality that had been created by slavery and by colonialism. All of this began to transform Europe and to give rise to different and contending social forces who wanted to overthrow the nobility, overthrow the landlords, because the landlords and the nobility and how they were producing things, how they engaged in production, placed a block on the forward development of Europe that needed, that was bringing in enslaved human beings, that was resulting in whiskey and various other kinds of stuff coming from slave plantations and just the whole transformation of the whole European society. This is the origin of the capitalist explosion, the democracy for white people that people bragged about, that came with what they call capitalism, came about as a consequence of the colonization and enslavement of Africans and other people around the world, the theft of the land that I am now living in, that's called the United States. All of this went to what Marx would eventually call primitive accumulation of capital. That accumulation of capital, that was a precondition for the rise of capitalist production. I hope I'm understood. So my basic point here in this discussion is that we have an element of disagreement with Marx in terms of the origin of the whole damn social system. Marx himself at one time was able to say that what he called primitive accumulation, which was transforming Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of black skins and doing so many things of stealing the resources from the indigenous people, he said that this in political economy was the equivalent of original sin in theology. In other words, this is where it all started. And this is where our understanding starts too. And our understanding of the state is related to this question as well. And I just wanted to do this. I know that was a long and involved kind of overview for the study that we're going to get into, but I think it was necessary. Uhuru. So, I think that today, the question of the state, I mentioned how, according to Marx, that one moves from capitalism. Capitalism is overthrown, and then communism. We have communism, but there was when there's communism, there's what Marx and Engels talked about as the withering away of the state. This special organizational coercion no longer exists. Don't need it anymore, because now we have equality in human society. But before this communism comes into existence, there is this thing that's called the early stage of communism, where there is a state. And the early stage of communism is when the workers, who are the real producers in society, after destroying the capitalist state that is there to protect the establishment, to protect the relationship between the oppressed and the oppressor, after this is overturned, then the workers temporarily create a state. The worker state has to be created. Why is there a need for a worker state? The workers have to have a state because just because the capitalists are overthrown doesn't mean they can say, wow, well, we lost that one, and they will go home peacefully. The workers have to have a state because the state is an organ of coercion and repression. And the workers have to have the ability to oppress, to repress, to coerce those who were the ruling class. If they are not repressed, if they are not coerced, if they are not shut down, if they are not denied freedom, then what will happen is they will become even more vicious in overturning the power of the working people themselves. They are the ones with the skills. They are the ones with the connections all around the world. They are the ones who've been producing and in charge of production, I should say, for the last several hundred years. They know how to do that better than the workers know how to do that. And they are the ones who have developed armies of repression and states and stuff like that. So left to their own, they will not simply say, okay, all my resources have been taken and redistributed among the working people. Now my child is not going to be able to go to school through expropriating, stealing value from somebody else. Or if they're in France, they won't be able to say anymore that we'll be able to continue living off the stuff that's stolen from the 54 so-called Francophone states. We just gonna have to get jobs like everybody else. They're not gonna do that. They're gonna do everything they can to return to power, and they're gonna be more vicious after they've overthrown than before they were overthrown. One, two. The other thing is that society itself has to be reorganized. Production has to be reorganized. It's just because there is a certain kind of productive inertia that exists, that things get left to themselves will continue to move as they have been moving under capitalism. And that's for the purpose of taking care of a handful at the expense of the majority. All of the practices on the job, the foreman and everybody else on the job, even the so-called union reps have a habit and tradition of carrying out production in a way at the expense of the workers who do the producing. All that stuff has to change. The education system has to change. And also the masses of African people and others who have been trained by white people, white power, to look up to and deify whiteness and white power. We have to have the ability to reorganize the society itself. And this is where the workers have to have their own state power. And this power that is recognized as the organized workers in arms is socialism. It is the early stage of communism. It is the entity that is necessary to change society so that there is no longer this theft of value, expropriation of value by one class at the expense of the vast majority of people. So I just wanted to just do that little overview, and I hope it was helpful. And because we're talking about the state, and there's a lot of confusion around the question of the state, and there's a lot of work people help to make it confusing. For example, Francois Hollande in France is called a socialist, and Bernie Sanders in the United States is called a socialist. And these are people who are able to call themselves socialists because they really are not for overturning the relations of exploitation that exist between the ruling class and the working class. Listen to what I'm saying, because the question of the state is fundamental. What Sanders and Hollande are doing, they call themselves democratic socialists and stuff like this. They are uniting with a socialism, which is they are uniting with a version of the state, because we just said that socialism is the early stage of communism, but it is a stage of communism at which the state still exists. Now the state comes into existence because the workers are now the ones who own and control the means of production. The workers, the majority of whom are now collectively in charge of that society, and there is a worker state. The worker state is called socialism, except Hollande and Bernie Sanders don't plan to see any worker state. They have no intent. They just want to keep the state. And this is one way that liberals have come about, capitalist liberals have come about to protect the social system, because the worker state is only a worker state after the bourgeois state, the ruling class state, has been crushed, has been destroyed. And now the workers create our own state. That's not what Hollande has done. They just transfer power back and forth between different sectors of the ruling class, just as they do in the United States. And in France, they call themselves socialists, and they call themselves other things, but the capitalist state remains in place. The same capitalist state is exercising power in all over West Africa under Hollande, the socialist, that was exercising power all over West Africa under Sarkozy, who was the president, who was the anti-socialist, the anti-communist in France. And Bernie Sanders is not talking about destroying the bourgeois state here. He still wants to keep the state in place, because if there's no state in place, bourgeois state here, then they can't keep funding and supporting and giving all kinds of resources to Israel, which is a military outpost for U.S. imperialism. He's not for that. He's not for expropriating the bourgeoisie. He's saying he's going to give the workers who produce all the value $15 an hour after a number of years. That's no socialism. That's the bourgeoisie wearing a different cloak that's necessary to make capitalism something that's more palatable to people who continuously running into the fact that capitalism does not serve our interests. And so now the capitalist now calls themselves a socialist, but the outcome is still the same. So the state is the fundamental question that we have to come to terms with. I'll also say that this discussion on the state should help us to understand the dispute that we might have with people at a critical moment like this, who are running around saying Black Lives Matter, and not being able to make any kind of demands on the social system, not make any kind of movement toward the actual capture of political power, and who will not even work to have an instrument that is responsible for capturing a political party. That's the African People's Socialist Party. We want the power. We talking about capturing state power, destroying the state of the bourgeoisie, and then capturing our own political power, the power in the possession of the African working class. This is the thing that also should shed light, this discussion on this notion that there's some hidden document that's someplace that most people don't know anything about it. It's buried somewhere in the White House or somewhere, some mysterious location in Washington, D.C. or elsewhere, that once we get our hands on this document, then we'll find out that we are really free, and that's going to be it. And there's a sector in the African community that has this kind of understanding about what it takes to win our liberty. Or we just left the Black is Back mobilization in Washington, D.C., and we had somebody who was telling us that the real reason we can't get our reparations is because we don't understand this stuff in international law. When you get this, and you have to be a state, you have to have your own government to get international law, and we don't have our own government, therefore we can't get international law, therefore we have to call ourselves a government, and therefore then we will get reparations. All of this stuff, you know, this is the kind of logic that's out there in the community, because people don't understand this question of the state. And the state is purposely kept at this very mysterious kind of thing, to the extent that people like to tell us that law in this country is based on some kind of Judeo-Christian something, you know, some religious connotation. And you go to court, you go to a courtroom, the court's transformed, that it looks like a church with the high ceilings, and you got the altar, I guess that's what you call it, where the priest sits behind it in his black robes, or her black robes today. And everybody has to be silent and all this stuff. This is the state. This is a cloak that's being put on over the state to give it a sense of mystery and awe, so that ordinary people cannot understand it. So so we want to take the covers off our understanding of the state. And I'm going to be expeditious now, because I know that I've taken almost half the time that we have allocated for us just with what might otherwise be called an overview. Everybody here should have access to what we call the Student's Guide. And I want to go through this rather expeditiously. And I'm hoping that what I've said up to now gives us some background. And I'm hoping that I'm going to leave time so that's to have some discussion, even if I have to cut it off in the middle of the process that we have here. I want us to be able to talk about some of these questions, because I think this is a critical question at the moment. And that, like we say in the African People's Socialist Party, we are preparing to govern. In other words, we are preparing to have state power. We're making that preparation everywhere we are located, and we're located in various places around the world. This is not just some thing that we're doing because we like the adrenaline high we can get having a demonstration or something to that effect. We are preparing to govern. That means we are preparing to exercise the power of the state. So when we look at this, we say we want people to be prepared to answer some of these questions. Under what conditions does the state arise in history? This is some of the quiz questions that we want people to be able to answer. What is the state? Define it. How was the imperialist bourgeois state born? How was the imperialist bourgeois state born? What does the state encompass? What is this? What is it, the different components of the state? What does it encompass? Give an example of the coercive power of the state. The relationship between the U.S. colonial state and the African working class is an antagonistic relationship. What does that mean? What means this, an antagonistic relationship? Can the African working class win our liberation by voting in our own government? Can we win our liberation by voting in our government? Why or why not? Give an example of an anti-colonial struggle that came to power but did not destroy the colonial state. What happened? How is democracy a form of the state? And there are various things here that, you know, we want everybody to look at. We want people to really go through the student guide and look at the kinds of questions that we're saying people should be able to answer. The other thing I want to say is that one of the most important works on the question of the state, and one of the most influential, is one that was done by a man named V.I. Lenin, who led the successful Russian Revolution. And he wrote a piece called The State and Revolution in 1917, which is the year that the Russian Revolution occurred. And we would advise people to look at The State and Revolution, to read it, and especially after this discussion that we're having, because Lenin was a Marxist, or followed Marx himself, and his worldview was influenced tremendously by Marx and Engels, who in fact he quotes copiously from Engels, who was Marx's friend and who worked with Marx. So our objective here is to instill in everyone the understanding of the state as a coercive institution that comes into being as an initiation of class rule. The state comes into being that protects the class that's in power. To teach the understanding of the colonial state as experienced by the African working class in all of its faces. To teach the colonial state in all of its faces. To show how the capitalist state was born at the expense of African and oppressed peoples. To show how counterinsurgency is a function of the imperialist state. To show that liberated Africa will be governed by the state of the African working class. That's what the objectives of this study is. So just want to say that the state arises when a society is split into classes, the haves and the have-not, especially when those who have amassed more resources got them at the expense of others. And this should be relatively easy to understand, because well, that's what you're looking at. When you're looking at classes, you're talking about different social forces in society that are defined primarily by the relationship they have to the means of production. And there are some people whose relationship to the means of production as producers, they work, they create stuff. That's where the value is created. And there are some people whose relationship to the means of production is they own and control what's necessary to produce. So you have this dichotomy in society with people who do all the producing and own nothing except the ability to produce essentially nothing. And then you have the ruling class that doesn't do any of the producing but owns everything. That's a profound contradiction in society. And that's not going to happen. Nobody's going to willingly, unless they're extraordinarily uninformed about who they are, what their interests are, willingly just go to work every day. Just think about it. People get up every morning, sometime before dawn, to go to work. They drag their babies off, waking them up to take them to child care. You know, if they can get child care, they do this every day, getting up and then and going to work for somebody. And think about it, that the persons that they work for, the institutions that they work for, take all the value, take the vast majority of what it is they have produced for themselves, and then give the worker who produced everything just a pittance. Okay, go home, take care of your snotty-nosed child, you know, find a way to do child care, do all of this, etc. And that's not going to be something that somebody will willingly do. Even an uneducated, uninformed person who has no understanding of the state will resist it. And some forms of this resistance is defined as crime. People want to eat, people want to take care of the children, people want a better life for themselves. And if everything in the society is structured in fashion that what they produce doesn't go to feed their own children, to develop housing for themselves, a safe and secure community for themselves, then they have to step outside of this process to try to accumulate, right? And so you can't have that. So this thing, the state, is absolutely necessary. That's why you have to have the police. That you have to have a police. You got a whole mass of people who wake up every morning. They got they can't see. There's stuff in their eyes and staggering around and stuffing themselves with coffee and this other stuff that people are selling now to get speed, to speed you up, to keep you awake and stuff. The people do that every day, and they don't get anything for it. Why would they do that? Why isn't that? They just say, hey, look, see all that food, in the store? Why don't we just go and take it? We know we need it. How? We see Toys R Us, and our children got nothing, and they say that we're supposed to have all this wonderful stuff. They advertise it on TV every day. Why don't we just go in and get it for the children? That's the logical thing to do. You got all the warehouses filled with everything. Why? The state. That's why you have to have this police and organization And then you have the courts and everything like that to back it up. So the state arises when society is split like this. If you got a society where somebody's going to be living on somebody else, you got to have the armed capacity to coerce, to forces people to do what you want done. The state is an organ of violence and coercion, protecting and serving the interests of a definite class. The state upholds the dominant force of a given social system and the class that is in power. And we say the class in power because when the workers come to power, initially we're going to have our own state. That's what socialism is going to be about. And socialism is going to be coercive, just like capitalism is coercive, except the capitalists coerce the people who do the producing, and the socialists will be coercing those who would try to overturn the social system and who return the bourgeoisie back to power, and those who would expropriate value from the workers who have produced everything. That's what the socialist state is going to be about. The bourgeois state is differentiated from past states in societies. We went through a number of states in society. We said there was a slave state. We said there was the feudal state. And then there comes this thing called a capitalist state. We say the bourgeois state, which is the capitalist state, is different from the slave state and different from the feudal state. And how is it different? Because the slave state and the feudal state, they were states that were born out of the societies based on the contradictions in the societies in Europe. So you got feudal peasants and serfs in Europe. You got landlords in Europe, and the state that's where it was born. But now you got a situation where you got a whole new force that becomes the bourgeoisie, or that contributes to the emergence of the bourgeoisie. And where is it stealing resources from? Where is this primitive accumulation of capital coming from? It comes from slave trade. It comes from colonialism. It comes from what the French are getting out of Vietnam, from what the British are getting out of India and Ireland and all these other kinds of places. This is where all these resources come from. And in order to make that happen, you have to have organs of coercion. People in Africa want to say, hey, you know, there's some white people out here with some ships and they want us to come and get on the ship so they can take us to this other land and work us to damn death. They would say, hey, let's get on there. No, they had to have force and coercion that participated in that. And then once transferring us, you know, to the lands that we were transferred to, this organization had to exist. It was born, the state, the bourgeois state was born as, for lack of a better term, an international state. It was different from every state that preceded it, and it exists today as an international. That's what NATO is. In many instances, what we call the United Nations functions like that too. And here's the thing I wanted to make, that people often confuse the state with the government. The state and the government are not necessarily the same thing. The government is the instrument through which the bourgeoisie exercises state power. Did you hear what I just said? The government is the instrument through which the bourgeoisie exercises state power. Any class, any ruling class exercises state power through the government. What does that mean? It means that the government is the one that says, okay, let's go to war over here. But the state is the institution that does it. The government, people in government, they go from, if they got time limits for however often they're elected, etc., they're in power. Then they're gone. But the state exists. Even after they're gone, the state is still there. And the state is there to carry out the mission of protecting the interests of the class that is in power. There have been instances where people have actually got control of the government, and people mistakenly thought that that meant that the people were in power. One case in mind is Allende. What was Allende's first name? Salvador Allende in Chile. A socialist gets elected to power. He's elected by the masses of the people in Chile. He's the president. So-called communists and socialists all over South America cheered. Many of them rushed into Chile because now there is a socialist president. And what happened? He didn't have control of the state. Who had control of the state? Richard Nixon and the United States government controlled the military in Chile. And the military in Chile rose up, crushed Allende, killed Allende, and then they rounded up revolutionaries from throughout South America in soccer stadiums and executed every one of them. These are the people who we're telling that once we get the secret thing and we get the government behind us, or we have our own, we call ourselves the government, that's enough. That's unreal. If you don't have a state, you got nothing, but a name. So you don't even see people who actually run the system. You don't even see them. On this phone now, for example, is a deputy chair of the party. She used to work for a city government in Pinellas County. Now, the government is elected by the people. People run every time they run, they stay there for a while. But deputy chair actually, without knowing it, worked for the state. She became a part of the state apparatus because we had people who became city council members, mayors. They were through there, in and out of there on a regular basis. But the state entity, the thing that controlled the police, the thing that controlled the fire department, the thing that controlled all those instruments of coercion and force, that was there all the time. And what happens is the bourgeoisie will make sure that the one they want, who represents them, thinks like them, who they pay, who they hire, like Barack Hussein Obama, they hire him, put him as the face of the state, but the actual state is the military force, it's the CIA, it's all of these other forces are there. That's where the real power is. So the government becomes an instrument through which the bourgeoisie actually exercises control of the state. And sometimes, guess what? Sometimes an election does not resolve the question of who controls the state. Absolutely. For example, when what's this man, Bush came to power, they felt like there were too many elements who were part of the state apparatus who were left over from liberal governments. They went around them. They created their own CIA, their own intelligence organization under Bush's group. What was Bush's the people who are some of the people everybody loves to hate, the vice Cheney and who was the other guy? And Condoleezza, of course, but Cheney and Condoleezza, you're right. She was a component of the state apparatus, just like Susan Rice is, and the guy who was Secretary of State under Rumsfeld. These people, they created their own special police organization that went around the CIA because they thought there were too many people in the CIA running these traditional organizations who were tied to the liberal sectors of the bourgeoisie. So the question is, who controls the state? And the government functions again as an instrument through which the bourgeoisie controls the state. It gives it a democratic character. So now you are oppressed by your own vote. You voted for who is there, and the policies that you voted for are being exercised by this sector of the bourgeoisie using the state as a means by which to do that. I hope that was understood. So we say that the capitalist colonial state protects the capitalist social system and the bourgeoisie. A socialist state protects the socialist social system and the working class. The state involves the establishment of a special force, a public power that appears to stand above society and is always repressive. The state uses the force of arms. Why we say above society? Because people pay taxes for it. It's not there with you. I mean, and look at how people treat the police, our heroes, and all these, other characterizations, the courts, all this stuff. These are that seem to be above. They appear to be above society. They appear to be the non-interested arbiters of what happens in society. The state uses the force of arms, creating special bodies of armed men and women to enforce its mandates and other interests. The state encompasses the police, the military, the courts, the prisons, and also everything in between. That includes grand juries, all of this. This is the state. This is the power of the state. The state forces its subjects to do things they might not want to do. Why do people pay taxes? Go to prison for something the state has determined is illegal. The state has the coercive power to enforce its mandates. In the US, grocery stores are filled with food, something everyone needs to live. But if you try to take some of the grocery store's food without paying, you will experience the coercive power of the state. The capitalist state keeps the oppressed African working class from taking back the value of the labor and resources stolen and exploited from us by parasitic capitalism. It's the capitalist state. And I want everybody to be clear on this, because they got a starving population that they create. And then they surround us with guns and special armed forces, police, cops, and things like that. And they use the government itself to create the image and attitude about who African people are and define us as criminals after they starve us, because the only way we can move toward trying to acquire not just what your basic food, clothing, and shelter, because nobody lives in today's world in white power systems just with food, clothing, and shelter. The fact is, the expropriation of value is so pronounced, so profound most of the time in America, in Europe, that people don't just get paid the value of what it is, their ability to work, which would be food, clothing, and shelter. People also get paid enough for beer, for a night out, and for the rock club that they attend in Paris, for the restaurants they go to. All of this is expropriated value. This is value that came from somewhere. So we say that, and the people who are starving, what do you got? You got people who are living in Paris, for example, living in what they call the suburbs. They are starving Africans and Arabs who are starving because France and the rest of the white world went to those places, stole their land, their resources, set up governments that did not serve them there, created borders that did not serve them there for the purpose of expropriating value. Tremendous amounts of value comes to France from all of these places that France is looting. And now here are the people who've come to France looking for their own resources. France has made it impossible or near impossible for them to live in Syria and other places like that. So they're in France. And now when they're in France, they see all around them the value that has been created by France looting the places in the Middle East. And they're just supposed to sit there and starve. They're just supposed to sit there, okay, I'm here. And while at the same time in France proper, in Paris proper, you've got the outside cafes where people are enjoying themselves with their whatever the hell it is they enjoy themselves doing. They're at the rock concerts. Not the people in the suburbs, not the Arabs and the Africans in the suburbs. They're at the rock concerts and what have you. And now people find themselves trying to fight back. And they're doing it in France, and they're doing it in America and other places too. So the capitalist state keeps the oppressed African working class from taking back the value of the labor and resources stolen and exploited from us by parasitic capitalism. And that's where the police is in Paris. It's in the suburbs. That's where they now increasingly in the urban areas of Paris, because more of us are in the urban areas of Paris. The contradiction between the African working class and the white ruling class is an antagonistic contradiction. It is irreconcilable. There's no way that the contradiction that we have with the white working class, with the white ruling class, can be amicably resolved. There's no way. There's no, okay, they like us now. And I hear this all the time. Wow, they like us now, you know. These white guys, they really like us, you know, which is what we hear. And this is what we heard from the Black Lives Matter guy, you know, what's in Hillary's, I want to know what's in your heart, right? You know, there is no way for resolving the contradiction exists between the African working class and the ruling class. It is absolutely, it's an antagonistic contradiction that can only be resolved through the destruction of one of us or the other. An antagonistic, irreconcilable contradiction is one that is enforced by state violence and can only be overturned by armed revolutionary struggle by the oppressed. To win a true victory, the colonized workers must overthrow all remnants of the capitalist colonialist state power, the military, police, etc., and replace them with the revolutionary workers' state, the People's Army, and defense forces. Salvador Allende in Chile and Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana did not militarily overturn the bourgeois colonial state apparatus and replace it with the revolutionary state when they took power. Therefore, those revolutions were quickly overturned by the US-backed coups within the ranks of their own military. The bourgeois colonial state must be crushed and wiped out by an armed cadre force led by a revolutionary working class party such as the African People's Socialist Party. They got to be destroyed completely. Democracy is a form of the bourgeois state. Lenin stated a democratic republic is the best possible political shell for capitalism. The fact that people can speak can vote or speak at a city council meeting covers the fact that both political parties in the US represent the interests of the capitalist ruling class. The democratic form of the bourgeois state masks the colonial reality for African people. The democratic form of the bourgeois state masks the political reality the colonial reality for African people. Frederick Engels noted that in some parts of North America, the state or the public power is weak. Capitalism and the capitalist state were born parasitic through enslavement of African people, the genocide of the indigenous people, and the colonial domination of the majority of the world's peoples. All white people, regardless of class, sit on the pedestal of the oppression of African and other colonized peoples and enjoy the resulting economic and political benefits. This is something that the colonized and subject must understand. It is all the white people, your girlfriend, all the white people, your mama, sit on this pedestal of the oppression of African and other colonized people. And this is not a statement of some personal statement about your girlfriend or your mama. I'm talking about scientifically, objectively speaking, that as a colonized people, there is this particular kind of relationship that exists between the colonized and the colonizers. This is the relationship. It exists all over the world. Anytime you see colonialism, that's why so many people work to keep us confused about what it is that we're struggling against. We know we're struggling against colonialism. We are well informed. But as long as people think we're fighting against racism, then the question is not to deal with this actual material and objective relationship. It is somehow transfers the contradiction, not between African people and the colonial state, but makes it a contradiction between black people and white people. And that is not the essence of the contradiction. It isn't. Because white people, we know white people. We know the white guy who we run into every day. Him and his mama are terrified of the black guy. It's the white people's state that is the terrorist organization that maintains this relationship. White working people therefore have unity with their own ruling class against African and colonized peoples and willingly and voluntarily enforce and carry out state violence and terror against African people. This is why white working people, from whom the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie is hidden, murder and terrorize Africans and lynchings and support police terror and mass imprisonment. Unity emerges between ruling class and the working class. So we say that the class question is concentrated in the colonial question. No class in the white society to overturn the state. That is to say that there is no class in the white society to overturn the state. That national suicide and solidarity is what is required. That the white people, in order to unite in opposition to their state and to white power in a way that unites them with the vast majority of other people and challenges the actual pedestal upon which capitalism and imperialism rest, would have to commit national suicide and become a part of the solidarity movement. African people inside the U.S. are colonized subjects, no different from Africans under the apartheid regime in South Africa. Therefore, there are two faces of the U.S. state: the democratic face of the state for white people and the full force of the violent, coercive, colonial state used against African workers. It is the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie is open and naked when it comes to African people. We use things like the dictatorship, which have been characterized a certain way by the rulers. Often we hear the issue of dictatorship meaning rule by some repressive rule by one person or something to that effect. But dictatorship, we say, is rule without regard for law. And in most instances, there is absolute rule without regard for law when it comes to African and other people. I'm not talking about you can't go to court and you can't get a jury. I'm talking about rule without regard for law. Most of the interactions that African people have with the state is not even in the court. It's on the streets with the police. It's the police stopping you and messing with you all the damn time. The law says you have the right freedom of assembly, right freedom of speech, but the police say you don't have no rights at all and act like it every day of our existence on the streets, in the school campuses, and various other places where we run into these guys. And then, of course, we find ourselves, because of the relationship we have with them on the streets, we find ourselves being the majority of the people in the prisons because of that relationship. And then you go to court and they say, well, you got a right in court. They say, what do they tell us? They say that you have a right to trial by jury appeals and all of this other stuff. But if you get arrested on the streets and sometimes for nothing, you're arrested, and you go before, and they send you a public defender, or the prosecutor himself would tell you that I'm going to give you a plea deal. I would give you 4 years or 3 years. You say, I didn't do anything, so you better take the deal. Because if you don't take the deal, if you go to court and you are convicted, and you will be convicted, you're going to get 15 years. That happens every day. So it's rule without regard for law. It doesn't matter what the law said. That's what dictatorship is. And with Africans, the dictatorship is naked. It's open. We see it every day. People are afraid of the police. They tell us, well, just do what the police say do. The Constitution and all this other stuff don't matter, because the Constitution presupposes that the police is an instrument of the people, that the state serves the people, that the government serves the people. But no, in real life, there's nothing like that. And guess what? White people will vote for the police to put you in jail. They'll vote for, and they do it every day. Every time you go to, you say, I am going to trial. And the white people say that, no, the police didn't do anything wrong. They shot your mama, killed your dog, beat you up bad. Nope, I didn't see anything wrong. That is rule without regard for law, where white people act as an arm of the colonial state to participate in maintaining this relationship that Africans and white people, that Africans have with the colonial state. But white people don't believe you. When you tell them that the police is bad in the state, they see it on television, they don't believe it. Because for them, the dictatorship is hidden. Even if they participated in it, there's a logical and legitimate reason for them participating in it, because everything they hear teaches them that you are guilty. All the time you're guilty. It doesn't matter what kind of evidence that they show you. It's just like the commercials that they have on television telling you that if you take this drug, I'm selling you this drug, here's the drug I'm selling, but if you take this drug for what you say is wrong with you, the drug will kill you in these different ways. And even as they're saying the drug will kill you in these different ways, they're showing you lovely pictures of what you could do if you were not impaired by the disease that is supposed to help you. And people buy the bad thing. So even though they participate in it, white people can be led not to believe, and they can be led not to believe this reality also because it's beneficial, because it helps them. Because this relationship that white people have with us and the rest of the world is beneficial. Cheap oil, cheap labor, and then especially with black people, somebody to look down on. And that's not a small thing. Because if they didn't have you to look down on, then they'd have to look at each other all the goddamn time. If they looked at each other all the time, they would see some frightening shit that they do not want to live with and couldn't deal with. So we become that outlet. We become the entity, so at least I'm not black. We become the force. Nobody teaches anybody that. They don't have to teach them that. Life teaches the people that there is this body out there that no matter what our circumstances, we are better off than this group out there. And that's one of the really pervasive and insidious things about this relationship. So the white people's state is also visible in Israel and South Africa, where white settlers, colonizers, regardless of their class, unite with their own ruling class in the oppression of the colonized. That's what they're working up in France today. Regardless, I mean, France, the demonstrations all the time in France, but they're working, most of the white people, 80-some-odd% of the white people after November 13 said that they would sacrifice their freedom for security. So they will sacrifice, their rights to be able to control all them other people out there who might be taking away their ability to sit on the cafe, sit on the outside tables in the cafes. The democratic form of the bourgeois state serves to obscure the repressive nature of the state toward African and oppressed people. In the current crisis of imperialism, many white people are beginning to experience some of the coercive face of the imperialist state, which they call fascism. Fascism is often defined as the form of the state that characterized by the exposure and use of armed force against citizens and the lack of democratic rights. That's, fascism. I mean, people they've come up with several different definitions of, in my view, meaningless terms for fascism. This form of the state, but the fact is that state repression has always been real for African people. So it's interesting that white people have come up with a new term, a new concept to explain the state when it acts in a way toward white people in a fashion that similar to how it acts toward African people normally. People tell us that we should be afraid of fascism because if Donald Trump is elected, fascism is going to be here. But damn, I mean, what's fascism? What's Trump going to do? I mean, 850,000 people stopped and searched in New York alone. What is he going to do? Double that number? What is fascism and what is democracy under the bourgeois state for colonized people? Counterinsurgency is a method of the colonial state to maintain colonial domination of our people. Counterinsurgency is the military, political, economic, and other actions taken by the oppressor nation state against the revolutionary movements and or guerrilla warfare of the oppressed and colonized people. In the 1960s, the Black Revolution was called the greatest internal threat to the U.S. security since the Civil War by the FBI and the United States government. The U.S. launched COINTELPRO, a counterinsurgent force targeting our movement and our people. Let me ask you a question. If the United States government in the 1960s declared that the Black Panther Party was the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States government since the Civil War, do you think, okay, we got rid of Panther, that's it? Don't you know that this government has to have a program, a contingency plan to deal with Black people? Don't you know that's part of the responsible reason that Africans are stuffed in these prisons and they're killed on the streets every damn day? Because what is a Black Panther except an African organized in some revolutionary fashion? And all the Africans who are oppressed are potentially members of an entity that would be organized to deal with our oppression. So it wasn't something peculiar to those Black people who were members of the Panther Party, except they're essentially from the African working class, and the fact is that the FBI said this is the greatest internal threat to the security of the United States. And what's the FBI? It is a form of the state that has a responsibility of protecting, it's a secret political police that has a responsibility of protecting this relationship that exists between the oppressed and the oppressor. Let me see. I'm trying to time this so that we will have time to talk. The U.S. launched a counterintelligence program, or COINTELPRO, a counterinsurgent force targeting our movement and our people. That was in the 1960s. This is a special program. It doesn't mean it was the only program, and it probably wasn't the most effective program, but this is the one that we come to know about. The U.S. waged a war without terms against African revolutionaries and the masses of our people. Assassinations, imprisonment, slander, provocateurs were used against us. African communities were flooded with deadly drugs, and entire communities are swept into prison. The whole African community was criminalized. Unlike in the white community, highly armed police occupy our communities, and our people are shot down and terrorized daily. Unlike in the white community, Africans are rounded up, men, women, and children, and herded into concentration camps called prisons. And they got special prisons that people don't even know about, like the ones they got in Chicago, where Africans are dumped in on a regular basis, all outside of the normal, quote unquote, procedure, judicial procedure. Counterinsurgency is not a result of bad cops or bad policy. And this is what must be understood. If you want to talk about why Mike Brown died, or why Eric Garner was choked to death, it ain't because they were bad cops, because they didn't have damn cameras on. It is because we say counterinsurgency is the correct, predictable response of the capitalist imperialist state to a revolutionary threat by a colonized people. Barack Obama and others would try to confuse people, saying that the problem is gun control. You need gun control. Gun control already exists inside the United States. It exists inside the African communities. That's why 850,000 people got stopped in New York. That's why stopping and searching black people is a regular thing that happens in this country every day. That's why they have laws that said a felon cannot possess a weapon, and they make sure that you are a felon. That's a form of gun control. That's why they have billboards up in African communities throughout this country say, turn in your guns and we'll give you $50 in a bag of groceries, starving nigga, because that is a form of gun control. Gun control is alive and well in the African communities. And because you see a handful of Africans who do have guns, they do it illegally most of the time, and it's not the absence of gun control. And the whole notion of gun control, of course, is to place a legal blanket over anybody with a gun so that they can guarantee the worst kind of treatment against colonized people. Neocolonialism is white power in blackface. Neocolonialism is a method of indirect rule of the colonial state in which a nation of people is controlled through using members of the colonized petty bourgeoisie to carry out the interests and the will of the colonial state, to maintain control of the means of production and human and material resources of a colony or colonized people. The neo-colonialists are often more brutal in their repression of the colonized people than the colonial state itself. Lenin and Engels talk about the withering away of the state. In discussing the African state, I have said that the successful nation-building struggles of Africans and others under the leadership of the working class will begin the process of the withering away of nations. The withering away of nations will be accompanied by the withering away of states. The working class seizes power through violent revolution. The means of production become state property under the leadership of the working class. When we say state property, it's a term that I sometimes kind of recoil from, because what we mean is that the means of production become the property of the people, exercised through its collective will in the form of the people state, When I say that, because sometimes the whole thing about state property handled by certain folk who call themselves socialists or communists meant another form of dictatorship of the people, are the ones who have to come to power. By doing this, the working class puts an end to itself as the proletariat and puts an end to all class differences and antagonisms. And this is something that happens. This initiates the process of the elimination of classes. The proletariat is the workers regarded collectively as a class. With an end to classes and class antagonisms, there is no more need for the state. There's communism. Under communism, the state withers away as it meets the needs and protects the entire society and is no longer needed. It is tied to the question of the nation. The struggle for the united liberated state of the African working class can only be led, we should say the struggle for the united liberated state under the leadership of the African working class can only be led by the party of the African working class, the African People's Socialist Party. African internationalism helps us understand the significance of the African Revolution in the realization of communist society through the destruction of parasitic society. So I wanted to go through that, and I want to open it up and see what kind of discussion we can generate. There are some quiz questions, with some of which I noted earlier in this discussion, that I'm hoping that people will really entertain and look at. But I want to just see before, I want to see whether it's necessary to go here by seeing what kind of discussion we can generate and what people feel they understand about this issue of the state and its significance after what we've gone through up to now. And I just want to remind people that you should be muted, and if you want to go ahead and participate in the discussion, please unmute, and let's go ahead and talk about it. I don't know what you're saying, Comrade. Say it aloud.
We got quite a few people online also.
So there are quite a few people online as well? Okay, so the people online, though, for them to communicate, how would they communicate?
They leave a comment.
They would go to the comment section on the online.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to open up for discussion, comrades. So please, let's hear what you got to say. Let me hear from you. Uhuru. Uhuru, comrade.
I have two questions.
Who is this?
I appreciate the
Who is this?
I always appreciate the discussion about the state.
Who is this? Who is this?
This is Life.
Okay. I know who you are,
Yeah,
comrade. I know your voice. I just want everybody else to know. I know your voice. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Life. This is Life from Tampa.
Okay.
And so I want to say I appreciate the discussion. I always appreciate the discussion around the state. So the first one is
You're breaking up seriously.
racism.
I can't understand your life. You're breaking up very seriously, and I'm hoping it's your phone, because if not, other people are going to have a.
Exactly.
Uhuru?
Yeah, we can't hear him.
You can?
We can't hear him.
Okay. We can't hear you, like.
Okay. Let me see if I can make that different.
That's better.
That's better.
Is this any better?
Yes.
Okay, so my first question, thank you, comrades. I didn't realize that I wasn't being heard clearly. Thank you. My first question, again, is it correct to say to anyone who would wage a struggle against racism, that a struggle against racism is a futile struggle because racism is the ideological underpinning of the irreconcilable differences between the African working class and the white-led state? That's the first question. And the other question I have is patriotism somehow related to how people attach themselves to whether it's the white workers who have this unity that you expressed that they have with the white ruling class, and even Africans who would find some unity, at least they think so, with the white ruling class. How does patriotism play a role in that, if it in fact does?
Yeah, racism is the ideological underpinning of the whole capitalist system. And it is a way how in any society where there is an economic base, that the ideas and political institutions, culture even, constitute what we refer to as a superstructure. And it is born of and reinforces that particular economic base. And racism is the ideological underpinning. It is born of this relationship, and it is something that arms white people and others in a fashion that they participate in maintaining the colonial relationship that exists between African people and the U.S. colonial state. And patriotism is simply loyalty to the bourgeois state and through which one has loyalty to the white ruling class itself. And it's really interesting because you have here like a convergence of a couple of different kinds of contradictions, because we saw different black nationalists and black communists who who previously were able to claim that they were opposed to imperialism and opposed to, and they were for having a black state and all of this, a black government. But with the emergence of Barack Hussein Obama, they became loyal to the bourgeois state through loyalty to Obama and his regime, and opposing anybody that challenged Obama and his regime. And the loyalty to the bourgeois state is really interesting, because it meant that people who call themselves fighting for our own government or working to have our own government were satisfied with the fact that Obama was elected, and that put them directly in his camp. So patriotism is simply loyalty to the bourgeois state, a loyalty to the state, and through the state, loyalty to the class that is in power. And sometimes you will find African patriots too. That's what we say, that you find white nationalists and black white nationalists and Mexican white nationalists, all loyal to the bourgeois state. And what's really interesting is that you will find too often a convergence of most of the people who are what we might call racist or informed by racism, or most of them you will find to be patriots as well. Even Negro patriots are often Uncle Ruckus. They are anti-African. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Yes.
We have a question from online.
Okay, where's it coming from?
Onyx Isis, and they asked, Uhuru Chairman, can you explain more about the withering away of the state? How will it look after the state withers away? Don't we need a state apparatus to protect the dictatorship of the working class?
Well, the state is the dictatorship of the working class, but it's the working people's state. It's the state, the African working class becomes the ruling class, and it becomes the ruling class after having destroyed. You cannot become the ruling class without destroying the colonial state. And when this happens, then and the instrument, of course, that's used to destroy the colonial state becomes part of the new state that's going to be the worker state. The socialism is the armed workers in power. That's what socialism is. So, and that is the dictatorship of the proletariat. And the dictatorship of the proletariat is needed as a precursor to the withering away of the state. The African working people and coming to power, the African liberation movement will introduce to human society the process through which nations themselves will wither away, because nations, as we know them, came into existence through the rise of capitalist white power. And we say that the emergence of a liberated African people begins the process of the withering away of nations also, because there is no need for the nation that's organized around a particular state at the time when everybody is liberated. And the African nation comes into existence as a consequence of a proletarian revolution. The bourgeois state, the nation of the European nation, and most other things that call themselves nations came into existence as a consequence of the rise of the bourgeoisie. They are bourgeois nations. It's a bourgeois nation. And the proletarian nation, the nation of the working class, will come into existence as a precursor. It is the dictatorship of the African proletariat as a precursor for the destruction or the withering away of nations, and through the withering away of nations, the withering away of the state. And how will it look? It will look unintrusive, and it would look, some of the evidence of how it looks, we've seen about some things that existed in the past. I'm not talking about some kind of, going back to what people have considered to be the past in Africa, where we go and find all the Egyptian mysteries and stuff like that. But I'm talking about, we've seen culturally how we look, and some of us have, and we have known what we're looking at when we see that, and much of that has been smothered by white power domination of the whole African world and most of the world. So, but you will be a part of constructing what it looks like. All of us will be. And there's a lot more that we can talk about on that, but that's a long, involved kind of discussion. I appreciate the question, and I think it's something that we will be talking about more and more as we go forward. Uhuru.
We do have more from the internet. I don't know if anybody on the phone has a question, but we got like...
Anybody on the phone question quickly? Because we'll go back to the internet. Go to the internet.
All right, we have Stephen X.
From where?
Toronto.
Okay.
He says, how do you explain the dynamics involved in the transitioning of the nation state to the market state?
And they came together. The market state under capitalism came together. When we talk about the market state, what you're talking about, when you talk about capitalism, you're talking about all production under capitalism is production for the market. It is, that's what a commodity is. Commodity production defines much of what capitalism is about. Under capitalism, things are not produced because of human need. They are produced because they will make money. It's for profit. They're made for the market. If a hospital is created, it's not because people are sick and they need to cure sick people. It's created because it makes money. Even medicines are created to make money, not cure disease. That's why you got medicines that will help people hobble along, crippled with cancer and shit like that, but you don't have a cure for the disease because at that point, there's no profit in it. So the market state is something that simply is a state that's based on capitalist principles. It is capitalism at work. That's what the market state is. And what was the question revolving around the market state? What was that?
And it says, explain the dynamics involved in the transitioning of the nation state to the market state.
Well, the nation state, as nations came into existence, and we're talking about the bourgeois nation. The nation state was the emergence of the bourgeoisie, and the bourgeoisie is capitalist. And so the transition from the nation state to the market state, I mean, the bourgeois nation state was born as a market state. Mm-hmm. Uhuru. Anybody else? Anybody else on the phone? Okay, go back.
All right, we do got David Lance. Didn't say where he's from. David, if you're hearing me, let me know where you're from. But his question is, do you believe that the state is reacting to an increased consciousness and awakening amongst the working class with the increase in violence that we see?
Between that, among the African working class, I would say that is true. Well, here's the contradiction. The white working class in general is not progressive. In general, the white working class is not progressive. In general, the white working class joins the Ku Klux Klan. It is the organization that joins the police department and creates all kinds of horrible things against African people in general. And that's why many people, times people say the white working class works against its own interests. But the white working class is functioning as a part of a European nation that has been given birth by the expropriation of value and the conquest of Africans and other people. So the African nation, all people in the African nation, certainly the vast majority, except for the Uncle Ruckuses, who we call a different kind of comprador capitalist, a comprador bourgeois. This is somebody who is locked and horribly distorted and part of white power. But all the people in the African nation experience colonial domination. All of the African people want an end to colonial domination, but for different reasons. The African petty bourgeoisie is dominated by capitalism. It means that often it is humiliated, it is very smart, school can't get into the best white schools, it can't get promoted in the best white schools and things like that. It can't get promoted in the military when they should be a colonel and they never get promoted. They can't become chiefs of police and stuff like this. They can't do this kind of stuff, and they can't get the contracts that the white people get when the city comes to power. So they are opposed to colonialism for those reasons. The African working class opposed to colonialism because every thing, every example, every experience that we have in life is oppressive and exploited. We get ripped off from day in to day out, and so what you got is under certain critical moments, the whole nation can be opposed to colonialism. But a struggle against colonialism, for it to be effective and to result in social transformation, must be led by the African working class. The African working class, therefore, comes into organization through the African People's Socialist Party, and it has a program that results, one, in the liberation of the African nation, because the whole nation has to be free, and there's no such thing as the African workers being free if the nation is not free. But the African petty bourgeoisie can be free, and the nation and the workers can be unfree. So the workers have to leave the whole struggle and take it into consideration the fact that the whole nation is oppressed. That's what happened in Vietnam. The Vietnamese were oppressed as a whole people, but the Vietnamese Communist Party led the revolutionary movement, defeated the French, defeated the US, and then they became an independent and free people. That's what has to happen with Africans as well. Anybody else on the phone? Come on, comrades.
Yes, Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Yes, this is Ndubisi in St. Pete.
Yes, Ndubisi.
I just had a general question about how you envision some of this. Basically, do you see if there is a need to actually replace some of these government entities or state entities? Because I know that some of these entities are really only in existence for basically nefarious and unscrupulous purposes. These are entities like the FDA, the DEA, CIA, and organizations like that. Do you think that entities like this need to be reformed or changed or corrected, or if in fact need to just be removed and abolished completely because they serve really no useful purpose for the masses? Or
I think that all of them have to be destroyed. DEA, FBI, AFT, for police departments, the National Guards, the U.S. Army, all of them, the CIA, FBI, they have no redeeming qualities at all. They are all instruments of bourgeois state power for the purpose of maintaining this status quo in the relationship. Doesn't mean that the state will not, the African state, the workers' state will not create an intelligence organization. It will have an intelligence organization. It doesn't mean that we will not have our own military capacity. We'll have a military capacity, but this will be different in the sense that it's now in the possession of the people, and the purpose will be to oppress the oppressors and to keep the oppressors from coming to power and being able to oppress the majority of the people. Uhuru. So we have another.
Uhuru, this is Stephen X again. He says, I'm speaking of the period where there are no nationalities. What is the nation going to be organized around if there are no nations? And he used to formerly go by Odeon.
Oh, I know Odeon. Odeon is in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The nation, what I'm saying is, he says, he's speaking of the time when there are no nations, right? Mm-hmm. And what happens? What with that?
What is the nation going to be organized around if there are no nations? If there are no nations,
a nation won't be organized around anything. What we're saying is that the rise of nations themselves came into existence with the rise of capitalism, and the need for Europe to organize itself around particular state that was exploiting value from everybody around the world, and to distinguish themselves in the process of doing that from those from whom they were stealing stuff. And the state became an instrument, the military instrument through which that was affected and for maintaining this relationship. I'm saying that because the European nation was born as a bourgeois nation, a capitalist nation. That's how it was born. And we're saying is that the African nation will be born as a proletarian workers' nation. It will come into existence after throwing off white power. We got to remember, we talk about the African nation, we're not just talking about something that happens in Toronto or something that happens in Houston, Texas. We're talking about something that stretches across the globe and on the continent of Africa too. We're talking about actually ushering in a dynamic force where the defining economy of the world will be an African proletarian economy. Just think about that, where we are located in all the world and in the center of the universe through Africa itself. So we're talking about a defining kind of being an African proletarian or socialist economy. And this then begins the withering away process of nations, because nations are no longer needed, because nations came into existence again as the bourgeoisie appropriating value from everybody else and defining itself based on that. So once the African nation is liberated, we begin the process of the withering away of nations, not just the African nation, but begin the process of withering away of nations in general. So with the withering away of nations, there will be no nations. I mean, all the borders come down and people can enter into reasonable and equitable relationships with each other. Human beings can look each other in the eye as free people and not have to be defined in these artificial ways that have come into existence with the conquest of power by white people and capitalism. So the withering away of the nations eradicates the nations, and the need for nations is no longer there. That's why the nations as an entity becomes redundant. There are no borders. The economy of the world is that, in a world economy, not something that's in the control of a handful of capitalists in this country, a handful of capitalists in that country, et cetera, that's often in competition with each other, and that controls market and creates anarchy in production and anarchy in distribution of resources. Now the world is open up for human beings ourselves. And the question now is no longer how one group oppresses another, but how we utilize resources to meet human needs based on eliminating, again, all of these false contradictions that have been imposed upon us, or if not false, contradictions that do not represent the interests of the vast majority of the people. Uhuru. So, yes, comrade, last one. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Listen, my question is this, and it's concerning white people's relationship to the capitalist state and the propaganda that they got going for them in terms of ourselves as object of history and them as subjects. I know this because, like, if you go, like over in Africa, the programs that were on the TV over there were programs like the white people on the wagon trains, same way they are on the wagon trains over here. But over in Africa, they were annihilating like Zulu in South Africa and in other places. And it was all, you know, based on this innocent white woman and child in the wagon train that the savages were attempting to kill. Same premise that they based the cowboy and Indian movies on over here, which I think really ties that white working class that you were saying that joins the Klan, ties them to the bourgeois state that they helped create by consciously murdering indigenous people, not just over here, but on the continent of Africa, and especially South Africa. So this means we got a particularly philosophical question, ideological question to deal with, in terms I know that APSC and reparations is going to have to play a major part in severing that umbilical cord that they got, because it's, you know, in my opinion, it's tied strong to the capitalist state. So how we go forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think the African People's Solidarity Committee is a powerful, and I'm tempted to say secret weapon that's in the arsenal of the African Revolution. And I think that also general solidarity that the African Revolution establishing with the oppressed and colonized people around the world also constitute a part of that. Increasingly, what will happen and what is happening is that the earth is changing under the feet of white people as a whole. All kinds of myths that white people have held on to in the past about their relationships with the world under assault. It was under assault in Paris, and it is forcing white people to have to think about things they've never had to think about before. No white person has to think about the origin of the food in the refrigerator when they open the door. They don't necessarily understand that when they can open a refrigerator that's full of groceries as a consequence of there being no groceries in refrigerator sometimes and right across town from them in the African community or the Mexican community or around the world. They have never had to think about that before. It's just ordinary. I saw a commercial the other day that said we don't have to think about it. When you turn on the switch, the lights just come on. It's not something that people have to think about. They don't have to think about the fact that the light comes on where they are in Manhattan because there are no lights in Freetown and Sierra Leone. There's not a logical connection there. But increasingly, the world is closing in on white people, and Africans and other people are intruding into the spaces that they have thought to be secure, their own secure spaces, and spaces that they have been led to understand are their own spaces created by themselves. That's no longer possible. Increasingly, it's impossible for that to happen. And I think it's really important for us to understand that the colonialism and slavery did not simply create the white ruling class. It created the white ruling class and the white working class. That the people who call themselves white workers or who are defined as white workers are a hell of a lot better off now, not just in 2015, but have been better off for a long time since slavery and since colonialism than before. So even colonialism has resulted in progress for white people, white workers, etc. Even land that's stolen from...
How can I help you?
Mute.
Mute, please mute. Please mute.
Tammy.
Mute, Tammy. You can't be on this line, Tammy. So anyway, K-Fing, yeah, you're right. The African People's Solidarity Committee is an incredibly significant weapon that we have. But I think it's also important to realize that there is a material benefit that has been realized by white people in general through, I mean, a white person is able to call himself an Argentine because the indigenous people there have been killed and their land has been stolen. So they're proud Argentinians. A white person is able to call himself a Canadian because they've wiped out lands and resources of the indigenous people there. I mean, and so they're happy Canadians, but their happiness relies on the fact that somebody else's happiness was absolutely destroyed, and whole peoples have been turned into alcoholics, and those who have survived what has been done to them. That's a material reality. That's not just something in their brain. That's just not just something, they just got bad ideas. This is, they have ideas based on a material, concrete reality that they experience. And that reality is changing underfoot. That's what Paris on November 13th was, changing reality underfoot. That's what we represent as a revolutionary organization, that change reality underfoot. So it's not just a matter of trying to discuss with white people how we're going to be better off. We do that because we want to allow for the most advanced sectors of the white community to unite with the future. But the future is black people coming to power, the indigenous peoples here and other places coming to power, and the whole material world changing underfoot. That's the thing that's going to force white people also to have to come to different kinds of conclusions and to make a decision of whether they're going to get on the right side of history that's moving things forward, try to hold history back by standing at the barricades to prevent the freedom and emancipation of the rest of the human family. Comrades, I want to thank you, and in a couple of days we'll get out notice to you. I think next Sunday we won't have a study, if I'm not mistaken. We won't have a study next Sunday because there is the fundraising cruise that people will be attending. Next two Sundays. Next two Sundays. So next two Sundays we'll be missing, but we'll get information to you. I do want to invite everybody here to call in, to listen to and call in at 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock on Africa Live. That's uhururadio.com. And you can go to uhurunews.com. We're going to have really two important interviews. One interview with comrades who attended the Moscow conference in October that I attended, the Dialogue of Nations, from Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and possibly someplace else. And then we're going to have a discussion with Comrade Louisa Kinshasa from London, Glenn Ford, Penny Hess, and myself on the situation with Paris and what that means and how we should understand Paris and whether or not we should follow the dictates of those who are saying pray for Paris. So that's going to be at 11. It'll start off, and I hope people will listen and call in and participate. Let's make it a dynamic show. That's Africa Live from 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 Eastern Time, going and ending at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So I want to thank everybody for coming on to this call. I thought it was a good discussion. Uhuru?
Uhuru, Chairman.
Yes, Comrade.
Uhuru. Can I make one announcement about the plenary this Chimaringa?
Go ahead, Chimaringa.
Yeah, I just wanted to make an announcement about the party, African People's Socialist Party plenary that's going to be coming up January 9th and 10th. This is a meeting that we have between our Congresses. Our last Congress was 2013, and we'll be having the chairman be making several presentations. It's going to be a lot of it political education and political training as well. And we wanted to get everybody on the call to register. You can register at apsplenary.org, apsplenary.org. The registration, the basic.
So people should do that. Sound like Chimaringa dropped off, but there are people will be coming here from throughout the country, and Louise will be here from London, Louise Kinshasa. I don't know if people will be coming from other places around the world as well. So we want people to please register, come and attend the plenary. It's going to be a really important event. We'll be summing up much of what's been happening around the world and also what's been happening with our party and our movement. Also, just want everybody to remember that we're doing the Africans Charged Genocide, and we want people to go and sign that petition. Go to africanschargedgenocide.org, sign that petition and share it, and convince as many people as you can to sign this petition. We want to try and get 1 million signatures on this petition. It's going to go before the United Nations. It's going to be used as a political instrument to try and grow political isolation of the United States and using the terror that it imposes on African people as the center of that. So, all right, comrades, thank you so much. We'll get in touch with you within the next 2 days to say what we'll be studying on our next study. Uhuru. Uhuru, comrade. Uhuru. Uhuru. Uhuru, comrade. Uhuru.